So I'm classifying this video as a hidden connection, and while that's kind of true, it's not an illegal connection like many of my videos often feature. Rather, in this case, we're actually going to be talking about a connection that I just don't see used very often, and it's unfortunate because it's a really useful one revolving around just one very common piece that can allow you to do some really great things with masks like these. Of course, this video is actually kind of two videos in one, so stay tuned towards the end where I talk about recoloring masks and different methods for doing that. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. I'm Skybird. Make sure you're subscribed, get us closer to 4,000. It's the best treat. It tastes like ice cream. I don't know. Anyway, the piece that this involves is this one right here. And I know right now you're asking me, Skybird, what the hell is that? Well, this is a piece that's honestly quite fantastic, but let me show you a better video picture of it. Definitely a video. Yeah, absolutely. It's this one right here specifically. It is a tile piece, round tile with a bar connection and an anti-stud on the bottom. Part number is 20482, and it is an exceptionally useful piece. But in today's video, I'm just focusing on one use case, because if you are familiar with the masks from 2001, the Toa Mata or Turaga masks, or if you're familiar with the Krata, the Krana, the Toa Nua masks, all of those connect via the same method. An anti-stud at the very bottom. No, not an anti-stud. A regular stud. I misspeak. That said, though, we can take advantage of that because, unfortunately, if you wanted a character like Jowler to hold his future self in his own hand, he can't really do it on his own, not without the help of this piece. Because this piece has a bar connection and an anti-stud, it essentially acts as an adapter for the hands of older style characters. So if you have a character that maybe doesn't have posable digits on it, you're not working with mocks here, but you're working with classic sets, well, this allows for those characters to actually hold on to their parts, their masks, whatever the case may be. And in this case here, it works out exceptionally well because that adapter has a bar on one side, which we know can go into an axle, and has an anti-stud on top, which we know can accept that stud connection. Meaning that I can have Jowler, I don't know, holding himself in some inception way and probably just like thinking a whole lot about how he got here. Point being, this is a really useful connection and it's dead simple. I'm sure that other people have discovered this one too, but honestly, I just haven't seen it as much as I thought I would. And I discovered this one a few years ago when I was playing around with like Matao's mask or something along those lines. Don't even remember why I did it, honestly, but I was very happy once I found it because it's so simple and yet it's something I'd wanted to do for a long time. That was something you really couldn't do with pieces back in the early 2000s. You could definitely adapt some pieces, modify some pieces, or maybe work with a much clunkier assembly to get something kind of like this. I've definitely seen people who will utilize this connection on the side here, since it is still anti-stud sized. You can have a character hold a mask or something like that, but certain materials grip to that point a lot better than others. So quite simply, that is the hidden connection portion of this video. But as I said, as I alluded to, this video gets better because I'm talking about how you can recolor masks in several different methods. So probably the one that I got into first, before any other, the one I had the most, let's say, experience with, or experimentation with at the very least, is something like this. This right here is a Miru in dark brown, and it was made this way via dyeing masks. This is where you actually use a chemical to change the color, alter the color of the mask that is beneath it. This was a mask that was damaged, which is why I ended up using it anyway. It was actually dark turquoise, which, yeah, I know is a little bit sad, but thankfully it looks quite good now, having come out this color. And incidentally, it turned dark brown by mixing it with red. Makes some sense, turquoise-ish color, red color, usually all mixed to make a brown, but it wasn't quite what I was expecting because I definitely wouldn't have thought that this would have been such a good match for Lego's dark brown. And it's a delicious color. Dark chocolate is delicious, guys. So yeah, don't eat it though. But it is still a very interesting piece in general. That said, the next method that I started experimenting with after this one actually came to me because someone had found, I'm going to use air quotes when I say that, a mask in their collection that didn't quite match the color tan, but also didn't quite match the color orange either. It was some kind of weird love child of these two colors. Well, what it actually was something like this. Not tan, not orange, in between, peach, if you want to call it that. This was made via bleaching. It's very simple. It's as the name implies. You submerge the mask in bleach, and then you wait for like a million decades. It takes a very long time, obviously, but it's something that I do in full sun. It's not something I do very often because, for one thing, it can leave the mask smelling like bleach for a very long time. The snow will dissipate as the chemical starts to become inert when exposed to air and a bunch of other things. Obviously, it gets washed, it gets rinsed, but the point still stands, right? However, the end result is gorgeous. This is a color that LEGO does not create, and I wish they did. It's so lovely. It's kind of a sherbet vanilla, a dreamsicle, if you will. It's a lovely color, and it's just one that needs a little bit more love. That said, next up is the one that I had probably the most recent experience with, and I have neglected to mention painting masks, not because you can't do it, you absolutely can, and there are many different methods of doing that, whether it be spray paint, airbrushing, using a Sharpie with paint, or painted markers, which can work really fun as well, and I've talked about those in previous videos. But it's just because I don't have any examples of that to show off in this video specifically. Painting is something I'm skipping over here. It is definitely a video that requires its own dedicated video. Redundancy. But this next method, I think, is a quite simple one. This, right here, this is resin casting. Now, on first glance, it is difficult to do the first few times you do it. It's actually not a high skill type of venture, but it is one that has kind of a high bar in terms of initial investment. There are a handful of pieces of equipment that you will want for resin casting to help aid you in making the best possible resin casts you can, the most consistent, so you have less failures over time, right? However, with that said, resin casting is also one of the more affordable options after that initial investment. That first hump can cost you like $1,000 to get into. That's probably overspending. It didn't cost me anywhere near that, but it can cost you several hundred, probably more than you expect. But once you're over that initial investment, it's actually pretty smooth sailing. What I use in my videos, and I talk about this in previous videos, but if you're newer to the channel, you may not have seen them yet, is I actually use acrylic paint for the most part as the pigment in my resin. It sounds interesting at first because acrylic paint is water-based, whereas the resin is typically oil-based. That is the case for me as well. So it does mean I have to kind of play it sort of strategically. There are some colors that just are not going to blend, certain amounts aren't going to blend, but resin, generally speaking, is sort of a precision art. Once you have the precision down, you can yield some really incredible results. And yeah, I show you that brown comb out because it looks lovely. But this is actually one of my favorite methods that I have developed, my favorite techniques. This is one that I kind of discovered by accident. I call it stippling, play stippling, I don't know. But the point is that you get a result kind of like airbrushing, somewhat like what you used to see in like older comic books and things like that too, where it has a non-homogeneous, whatever the word for that is, mixture of the two different colors. You could probably do it with more colors as well, but instead of getting a smooth gradient between, in this case, white and black and going through a grayscale, no, all of the little dots, the little particles of pigment separate out. So you don't have white to gray to black. You have white to white spots and black spots, and then you have black, and it's such an even distribution. It looks beautiful. It is so lovely, and I wish that you could see this in person because it is just phenomenal. I have more than one. I'm happy. That fell right into my mask box. This one here, which uses dark turquoise, a perfect match for LEGO's dark turquoise, and I've mentioned that recipe on the channel as well, but a lovely, lovely little piece. But of course, you're not limited to just opaque colors. You can do things like this, which do not show up very well on this camera, but this right here is trans neon pink. I know it looks trans neon orange, but it is pink. My camera, again, and the saturation does not help there. However, that said, with resin casting, yeah, you can do some really fun stuff. You can mix and match, you can throw everything at the wall, see what sticks, but you can also just keep it simple, do solid colors, and honestly, I think sometimes it's the simplest ones that give you the best results. But that said, those are not the only methods, because what about the most, well, let's say lazy method, for you and I anyway? This is the method I call do nothing and just buy the parts in new colors. So this one here, this is a mask by Kinney, who has a store over on AliExpress, is also a member of the Discord server as well, and they actually ABS inject their own masks. This is plastic right here. It is injection molded, and it is lovely. This right here being, of course, lime green, this being dark tan. I've got sand green in here, I've got dark blue in here, which I now have on the very top here. I've even got like trans old brown, whatever you want to call this, old trans black, whatever. So really, really lovely colors involved here. Those are just some of the methods out there. Like I said, it's always fun to experiment. And with the exception of dyeing masks in this case, none of these masks were damaged because all of the resin casts that you've seen in this video are resin. That's it. They're not masks that have been coated in paint or anything. So you don't have to worry about pieces getting damaged or lost or broken or anything, because the mask that goes into making this comes right back out in perfect condition. It is unharmed, which is fantastic. So with all that said though, that's basically everything I wanted to cover in this video. Hopefully you guys did enjoy it. Hopefully you learned something from it. If you are looking into more information on any of these techniques and maybe experimenting with any of them, I'd highly recommend looking up some different YouTube channels, especially when it comes to resin casting, because it is kind of its own beast, but it is a lot of fun to learn how to do, and it is definitely something I'd recommend. If you are somebody who is underage and you want to learn resin casting, have a parent with you. It can be a lot of fun to do with somebody else as sort of a little side hobby thing. You can make some really cool stuff, even outside the Bionicle world. I have friends that do jewelry and things. It's honestly fantastic. I'd highly recommend it. That said, that's it for this one. Make sure you're subscribed again. And of course, you can check out Discord, Instagram, and Patreon, all of which are linked down in the description below. See you on the next one.